It's Halloween. Everyone's entitled to one good scare.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Entitled Scares, the podcast where we dive into all things horror. I'm your host, Z, and today we are kicking things off with a very, very good Halloween classic, John Carpenter's Halloween from 1978. And I want to talk about this movie to kick off the spooky season because it not only put Michael Myers on the map, but it basically created the modern slasher that we know today. And so this podcast episode is basically going to be a breakdown scene by scene of the movie. We're going to talk about the kills a little bit, talk about significance of the movie, and really just kind of go with the flow and kind of just play with things. Since this is episode 1, I want you guys to just work with me. I am also learning things as I go. So if I slip up or if anything sounds off, just know that I am trying to work with everything. And, as I said, just learn everything as I go. So, just try and listen along. And of course, if you guys have any pointers, suggestions, or anything of the sort, you're more than welcome to reach out to me on all my socials. But from there, let's just jump right into it. So to start, I want to give a little bit of background on Halloween. So Halloween 1978 is a classic horror movie, to say the least. It basically, like I said before in the intro, it jump-started what we know modern slashers to be today. And when I talk about modern slashers, I'm talking about the Texas Chainsaws, the Friday the 13th series, Nightmare on Elm Street, and just different movies of that sort that kind of deal with that stalking killer who's doesn't really have an MO, who's stalking its prey and just kind of popping in and out of nowhere. And we're not sure if it's supernatural, if it's human, if it's demonic. We don't know what's going on with the person or the killer. And so before I talk about the actual background, I do want to discuss some of the characters that we're going to be talking about. And so the main 3 characters of the movie is Laurie Strode, who is played by Jamie Lee Curtis. And then we also have Dr. Samuel Loomis, who is played by Donald Pleasance. And then we also have Michael Myers, aka The Shape, who is played by Nick Castle and Tony Moran. And then some side characters that we'll focus on is Annie Brackett and Linda Van Der Klook. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And they are played by Nancy Keys, and I believe that's... what did I write down? I can't even read my own notes, child. I believe it's Jay Souls, I think. And then we will also, PJ Souls, that's who plays Linda. And then for the next character we might focus on is Sheriff Lee Brackett, who is played by Charles Cyphers. And then we also have Lindsay Wallace, who is played by Kyle Richards from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And then we also have Tommy Doyle, who is played by Brian Andrews. And so to jump into the background of the movie, it's a very low budget film. It was only made for about $300K, but it did do a very good turnout in the box office. I believe it got 60 to 70 million in return. It was directed by John Carpenter and was co-written by Deborah Hill. And some other movies you may know John Carpenter for is The Fog, 1980, The Thing, 1982, Christine in 1983, and then Village of the Damned in 1995. And so if you know horror movies a little bit, those might stand out to you, especially The Thing, and then Village of the Damned, or even Christine, if you know about the Killer Car movie. And so another quick background is Jamie Lee Curtis. This was her film debut, and she would go on to play in many iconic roles outside of Halloween, such as Prom Night 1980, My Girl in 1991. I believe she played in My Girl 1 and 2. She was also in Freaky Friday, which a lot of us late 90s, early 2000s babies may know from 2003. She was also in Christmas with the Cranks in 2004, and a lot more movies that I didn't even list there to give her her flowers. But she's a very good actress. Definitely love her movies. I just think she does a really good job just showing what a final girl is in this movie and just showing what a true scream queen is. And I think she just set the standard to what we look for in horror movies, trope-wise, when it comes to our final girls, and what we look for when we look at these women who are in the spotlight in horror movies or the main characters within horror movies. And so I think another significant thing to bring up about this film is the fact that it has a very classic score and a very classic theme song. I think if you play that classic piano theme song, I think anyone can get a little bit scared, a little bit kind of entranced a little bit, because it's so simple, yet it does such a good job at setting the scene, making things eerie and paranoid, and it's just a very classic theme in my mind. And along with having a classic theme, it also brings forth classic tropes that we see in scary movies, like I mentioned before, like that final girl trope, as well as that silent, unstoppable killer who, we can't tell, what the deal is with them, if we can kill them, what can kill them, what are the rules, and things of that nature. And so, as previously mentioned, I said I'm kind of flipping through my notes here, so please bear with me. But like I said, this movie did kind of jumpstart other movies that we know today, such as Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. We also have other movies like Silent Night, Bloody Night from 1972. And you also have Black Christmas from 1974, who all kind of play into that stalking killer trope, and final girls and teenagers and teenage life, and just kind of all mushing everything up into one thing to make something horrifying. So I think that's really cool. I do believe a lot of people say about this series it's kind of boring. And I can somewhat agree, even though this is my favorite Halloween franchise, or horror movie franchise, to not confuse you guys. Because I think it sets the tone for what we know horror to be today. And I think it's also very realistic. If you look at past the boogeyman aspect to Michael Myers and look past the idea of him being some supernatural being that can't be defeated, I think he does do a good job, or the movie as a whole does a good job making me terrified of masked men or just masked strangers. Because if I was to see somebody, stalking after me in a, white mask, I would probably be quite freaked out, especially if they're not talking, they're just breathing really heavy, and they always seem to appear. I'm sure I would be quite terrified, and that's not something that's so outlandish. For a movie, of course, it can seem very dramatic, but I don't think that's so hard to think that a masked killer could be on the loose somewhere. And so I think that's why the Halloween series really does terrify me. Now, I will say, along with it being kind of a boring franchise, I do also think that it's kind of it's somewhat all over the place, because it does have 13 movies total, and there is also 5 timelines total. So depending on which timeline you're looking at, or even which movie you're looking at, it can kind of change your opinion about the whole franchise. And so I really want to focus on Halloween 1978 because, like I've said plenty of times since I did the intro of this episode, I just think it sets the scene and the tone for what we believe to be the horror movie formula. The pacing, the paranoia, the final girl, the silent killer, the crazed doctor trying to find the killer and doing what he can to destroy the evil. I just think it's very interesting, and I'm hoping this breakdown kind of sparks you all's interest as well. So without further ado, I am going to jump right into it, starting with the opening. And like I said, I'm just going to go scene by scene, and it might be a little bit all over the place because I am flipping through my notes. However, I will try to, make sure everything flows just fine. And hopefully by the end of this, we can all be on the same page about our feelings about Halloween 1978. And so, to basically start off with the opening of the movie opens up with credits zooming in on a pumpkin. And I think this is a very cool shot because not only do you hear the theme song, you're also seeing the zoom in of this pumpkin, which has a outline of Michael Myers, his head, as well as his knife. And I know that a lot of people said that it was very hard to see in the early movies. So in Halloween 2018, if you look at the newer ones, they do show the pumpkin again, and the outline of Michael is a lot more pronounced, or is a lot more defined. So it's a lot easier to see that that's him. So I think that's kind of cool. And so after you get through the credits, zooming in on the pumpkin, you get this POV shot. And we're in Haddonfield, Illinois in 1963. And we're following this POV shot to a White House, kind of colonial style suburban home. And we're walking up to this window, and we see this teenage girl and her boyfriend. You know, they're kind of kiki-keying and, you know, being all touchy-feely. And we assume this is Michael's sister. If you haven't seen the movie, we assume this is his sister because the boyfriend was basically like, you know, are you sure we're alone? And she said, yes, Michael is off somewhere. So we can assume that this is either his sister or, of course, a babysitter for Michael, or both. And so we watch Michael watching his sister and her boyfriend go upstairs. And they're going upstairs to hook up. And so then we get this really cool beat drop where Michael, it's like he kind of steps back from the home and he looks up to the room where the teenagers went to. And we see the lights cut off, and there's the beat drop is kind of like a da-da-da. And it's really, really cool to me because it's just like the first little kind of, I guess, it's almost like when you hear a gunshot at the beginning of a race. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Because by this point, once the music drops, like this is where Michael is starting to pick it up. And we're basically going on our first part of our murder spree here. And so after that beat drop, we still continue to follow the POV. And we follow the POV into the home. And then we see Michael collecting a knife. Or who we assume to be Michael carrying the knife. And then we see him kind of walk through the living room, or I guess / voyeur room, and the boyfriend passes by, somehow doesn't see Michael, even though it's pretty bright in there. And so the boyfriend goes out the home, and so we follow the POV up to the room where the teenagers were hooking up. And so by this point, I believe the sister, her name is Judith Myers, she is on the phone. And so Michael goes up to her, starts to kill her, right? And so after he gets done killing her, he goes outside. We see parents pull up, or basically just like, Michael, what's going on? And then they remove the mask, and then we're taken out of the POV, and then we are stuck on a still shot. I want to say about maybe a 30-second to a minute long still shot, panning out, and it's of Michael and his parents. And it's kind of funny, kind of cheesy, because literally it's his parents just holding holding his mask and just standing there staring at him. And Michael's also just kind of like staring like, oh shoot, I've been caught. Like, darn it. Like, he just looks so like gagged that he was even caught after coming out the house. So it's kind of a funny little thing. And so we don't see any police pull up or anything. And after the parents reveal Michael, we fade and we go to 15 years later. And so now we're 15 years later on October 30th, 1978. And we start off at Smith's Grove Sanitarium. And right now we're in the car following Dr. Loomis and Nurse Marion Chambers. And so basically during this car ride, they're discussing how I believe Michael is being moved to a different facility. And Dr. Loomis is kind of giving us some background on his thoughts on Michael. And he's, calling Michael a it, kind of just saying like he needs to, be watched out for, like he's dangerous, all this jazz. And so as they are driving to Smith's Grove to get Michael, they come across a bunch of patients roaming around. And so, of course, they're confused, wondering why this is happening. So Dr. Loomis ends up getting out of the car, and he is going to try to figure out what's happening here. And so while he's trying to check everything out, the nurse Chambers, she stays in the car, and out of nowhere we see Michael's big behind climbing on top of the car. And so he climbs on top of the car. So Marion's tweaking, she's tripping out. She's like, what the heck is going on here? And so Michael ends up smashing a window, attacking Marion, ends up pulling her off the car, and steals the car. This is also another moment that kind of tickles me, because genuinely, how the heck does Michael know how to drive? He was taken to Smith's Grove whenever he was 6 years old. And so by this time he's 21 if it's 15 years later. And so it's just like, who the heck is teaching Michael how to drive? Who was giving this boy driving lessons? And I want to say in Halloween, what Halloween is that? It might be the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, or maybe like Halloween 2 or 4 maybe, where the movie kind of touches on Michael being taught to drive. It doesn't like go into too much detail, but it just kind of like hints at someone teaching him how to drive. That might actually be... I want to say there's a Halloween called Halloween Resurrection, or Halloween H2O. I know H2O is a thing, but I want to say it's a Halloween Resurrection, I believe. And that may be the one where they touch on that. But anywho, so we fast forward. Michael speeds off in the car. And so now we fade again. We're on Halloween day. So we're moving kind of fast. So now we're on Halloween. And we are meeting Lori and her friends, Annie and Linda. And Annie is the daughter to Officer Lee Brackett. And so that kind of gives what you think is kind of a protective layer there, knowing that her dad is a part of the police force. And so Annie and Linda are kind of like your typical horror movie teens, really horny, really boy-centered, just trying to figure out where the next function is, very, very, out there, very fun. And, they're kind of just like, as I said, just typical teenagers. Whatever trope you believe a teenager's to be in a horror movie, especially in the 70s, they're showing that to me, in my opinion. And so during this time when Lori is with her friends, Michael is stalking Lori. Lots of heavy breathing. This man is breathing up a storm, even though he literally just got out of a car. He's breathing heavy. I know the mic, not the mic. I keep saying the mic. I know the mask probably reeks. It's a lot of stuff going on. Lori ends up seeing Michael outside of class, and this scene kind of reminds me of It Follows, where the main character is seeing the entity kind of everywhere they go in the background, and is always following them. And so that's kind of how Michael is popping up, and then she'll look back and he'll be gone. And so while he's on the school grounds, we cut from Lori for a little bit, and we see... I believe his name is Lonnie. It's another kid. He's bullying Tommy Doyle, who is the child that Lori is going to be babysitting that Halloween night. And so Lonnie is bullying Tommy, along with two other kids. They knock Tommy down. He crushes his pumpkin, whatever. And so as Lonnie is running away, we see him bump into Michael, and Michael kind of like grabs his shoulders and is kind of just like, hey kid, like, he doesn't say anything, but he's just kind of like, hey kid, like, watch the heck out, like, get out of my way, like, move. And so Lonnie ends up running away, whatever, doesn't say anything to the man. And so then Michael kind of stalks after Tommy for a while in the car. And I want to say this is the scene where it's kind of weird, because it's like, we're in the car with Michael getting his POV, but it's like we're in the back seat and he's in the front seat. So I'm not sure why the camera chose to do that angle, or why John Carpenter chose to record from the back seat rather than the passenger seat, since we're supposed to be Michael. But just another fun little horror shot, I guess. And so after we see Michael stalking Tommy, we then go back to Loomis, who comes across a crime scene, and it basically looks like Michael has ransacked a truck as well as the driver. The driver is killed, he's murdered, and his clothes are gone, so we assume that's where Michael gets his famous mechanic jumpsuit from that victim there from the truck. And so after... So, okay, I'm trying not to be all over the place. But so after the crime scene, we then go back to Lori and her friends, Linda and Annie, and they see Michael following them in a car. And so when they see Michael drive by, I believe it's Linda or Annie. I want to say they say like speeding kills or something like that. And so Michael is driving by and he like skirts to a stop down the street in front of him. Doesn't back up or anything. He just stops and the girls are just like, okay, whatever. Totally not creeped out by that. Me and my friends personally would have been quite shook and probably would have ran away and went to go get help somewhere. And so after they see Michael do that, Lori and Annie see Michael behind a bush. And this part is kind of frustrating because Lori points out to Annie that she sees Michael, and Annie somehow doesn't see Michael, even though he's quite literally right there. When I tell you he's right there, like, he's right there. So it's just like, if I was Lori, I'll be like, girl, you don't see him, especially since they look up and he's like gone. And so Annie ends up going over to the bush. She's playing with Lori and is like saying, oh, you know, Michael wants to meet you, but of course he's gone from the bush. Neither girl sees him anymore after this. And so we jump a little bit, and so after seeing Michael behind the bush, Lori ends up running into Annie's dad, Officer Brackett. And it's nothing too crazy in this scene. However, this is where I get not only the title for my podcast, but the slogan as well, entitled Scares, or we're all entitled to one good scare. And so I think that is very cool to see, because it's kind of a weird line coming from, you know, if your friend's dad was to bump into you and was like, oh, well, you know, everyone needs to get scared sometimes. I don't know, it just kind of seems a little bit weird. And so Lori finally makes it home after running into Brackett, running into Michael Myers, departing from her friends. She finally goes to her room, and for some reason when she gets home, her bedroom window is like wide open. And so she ends up seeing Michael Myers in the backyard. Now, mind you, she's seen Michael already a good number of times. So by this point, I'm like, Lori, call the police, girl. You're in danger, girl. Like, you need to call somebody and let them know what's going on in here. Because, like I said, she's seen him too many times to be this calm about it and to simply brush it off and just close the window and continue with her day and her evening plans. And so after seeing Michael in the backyard and him doing the whole disappearing act again, Annie calls Lori and invites her over because she is babysitting Kyle Richards' character, Lindsay Wallace, I believe was her name. I can double check that. Yes, Lindsay Wallace. And so she invites Lori over, and, you know, she agrees, all that cool jazz. And so after this phone call, then we jump back to Dr. Loomis, and he is at a cemetery, and he is basically going over there to, you know, see what's going on, check the burial site of Michael's sister, all that good stuff. And when him and the cemetery manager, not sure what you call it, cemetery manager, they see that Judith Myers's, or Michael's sister's, gravestone has been stolen. And this is where we get one of Dr. Loomis's little dramatic lines, and he just says, he came home. And it's just so like, Dr. Loomis just has so many scenes about Michael that are just so like, I don't know, it's just so funny because you can truly see like how, I don't want to say disgusted he is in Michael, but you can just tell that he is like, he thinks there is no saving Michael. He's like, this is it. This is evil. We must contain it. We must destroy it. And that's the end of that. And it's like, okay, Loomis, we'll do what we can, man, as long as it's not against ethical codes and it won't get anybody arrested. And so after Loomis, you know, makes this he came home line, we then jump to Lori and Annie driving with each other, and we hear the nice little tune of Don't Fear the Reaper. They're smoking weed, just chatted up, being girls, whatever. And they, for some reason, don't notice Michael Myers following them. Mind you, Lori and Annie have seen Michael in this little car multiple times at this point in the same day, and neither one of them seemed to notice. I don't know if it's because of the weed messing with their minds, or if it's just the nonchalantness of the times, or them being teens. I'm not quite sure. But as for me and my friends, I'm pretty sure we would notice if Michael was falling behind us, because that's too many occurrences, too many sightings, as too much going on. I'll be paranoid at that point. And so they still continue not noticing Michael behind them, and they eventually come across Annie's dad, Officer Brackett, at a hardware store robbery. And this scene is so weird because, mind you, as I said, they were smoking, and so as they're like pulling over to the crime scene, Annie is like, Lori, why are you coughing so much? You need to relax. Because Lori is like choking. She's coughing or whatever. And in my mind, I'm just like, well, ma'am, you didn't necessarily have to pull over to say anything to your dad. I mean, he's working a crime scene, so he probably wouldn't have noticed that you had drove off or drove past him. And even if he did, what was he going to do? Leave the crime scene and follow you? That doesn't make any sense. And so, anywhoosies, they end up pulling up to the hardware store, and the dad says, there's been a robbery. They stole some masks, some knives, some rope, all this, nice Halloween stuff. And so after this, we cut to actual Halloween night when, the story is starting to pick up a little bit. And so we hear the theme song starting to pick up again as Michael Myers is following the girls. And he's following them in the car still. And he ends up pulling over and getting out the car, still breathing hard as hell. Still don't know why, because like I said, for most of the time, he has been driving, or at least walking, quite slow. So I really don't see why he's breathing that hard. I guess the mask is, compressing his breathing, but still, I just don't understand it. I thought that was always weird for Michael. But anywhoosies, we have Loomis and Brackett, who end up going to Michael's home. And this is also another funny scene because I believe it's Brackett who notices a dead dog in the home. And he was basically just like, oh, it's still warm. And so Loomis was like, he got hungry. And it's just like, Loomis, like, you need to just relax. I don't know. And maybe I'm probably not like saying it to where it would be funny to you guys listening. But I promise you, if you go back and watch the movie, like, I think it's just funny thinking of it in the context of like them looking for a serial killer, and Loomis is the only one who genuinely thinks this person is crazy and isn't even a person. He's been calling it it, or he's been calling Michael it this whole time. And this is also where we hear him say that Michael isn't a man. And we kind of hear a short little monologue from Loomis, if you can call it a monologue, where he goes into Michael having no consciousness or understanding, and explaining how he met Michael at 6 years old and spent years trying to figure him out, and then spent another good amount of years trying to keep him in the facility, or whatever facility he could, because he realized that there was no helping Michael. There was no rehabilitating him. There was no, like Loomis says, he had the blackest eyes. There was no, the lights were on, the lights even were on, and nobody was home in Michael's mind. It's all just moving like I guess you would call it an apex predator, just kind of going with the motions, killing to be killing, and destroying anything in his path. And so after we see Loomis and Officer Brackett talking in Michael's home, then we see Annie calling Lori. And so, like I said before, Annie is babysitting Lindsay, Kyle Rich's character, and Lori is babysitting Tommy Doyle. And so while on the phone with Annie, Tommy ends up seeing Michael Myers across the street. And for some reason, again, Lori does not care. I feel like if at this point, if you're at a babysitting job, you've seen Michael a good number of times, whether anyone validated those sightings or not, you've seen him. And now the kid that you're babysitting says that he sees him, and you're saying there is no boogeyman outside. Lori, I need you to use your big girl brain, ma'am, and figure out what's going on. I don't even need her to go outside. I don't even need her to go outside and investigate. I just need her to validate what Tommy is saying, because golly, that's terrifying. I just don't know. And so after this, we get this other really weird scene that I think also does a good job at visualizing, or I guess illustrating, the trope of boobs having to be shown in horror movies, or just unnecessary nudity in horror movies, especially early like 70s horror movies and 80s horror movies, because Annie was on the phone with Lori, and she does this weird, like, when you're looking at the scene, you can definitely tell that she was like anticipating doing this, and she definitely purposefully spilled water on herself, right? And so the water goes like on her stomach and like mid stomach, lower stomach a little bit, and kind of on her pants. And so Annie ends up telling Laura on the phone, like, oh my gosh, I just spilled some stuff on myself. And it's like, stuff, girl, it's just water. And so at this point, Annie starts undressing herself and gets into her panties. Now, mind you, Michael is watching her do this. Michael is outside. She can't see him, but Michael's outside looking through the backyard door, watching Annie get undressed, whatever. And so it's just really weird, because also during this whole scene of like Lori talking to Annie, and like Annie like moseying around the home, Lindsay's home, the camera keeps cutting back to Lindsay watching TV. And when I say it's literally her just sitting there, like one scene could be Annie asking Lindsay, hey, do you want some popcorn? And it'll cut to Lindsay watching TV, and it may be on her for a good maybe 10 seconds, and it will literally be her just sitting there doing nothing. No facial expression, just watching TV. Or the next scene may be, if let's say Annie is getting killed, she may say, oh, Lindsay, call 911, and Lindsay is just sitting there. That's not an actual scene, but it's just like, Lindsay, girl, like, you don't hear me? Get up, do something, I beg. And so between that, Annie getting undressed, putting a random button up on, and the camera cutting back and forth to Lindsay watching TV, Annie hears Lindsay's dog barking. He's been barking all night, and she's been complaining about it. And so finally she hears the dog whimper, and she's basically just like, oh, I guess he finally shut up or found something to entertain himself. Whole time it's like, girl, that whimper was not the sound of the dog finding any joy in anything. That was the sound of him getting murked, ma'am, and being turned into ground meat for Michael to eat. Ma'am, like, the common sense of this movie is kind of non-existent. To sum it all up, I think I've given plenty of examples to show that, so I'm just gonna come to that conclusion and go ahead and come out and say it, that common sense is not common in this movie at all. And so after the dog gets killed, Annie goes to Lori to drop off Lindsay, because she's going to pick up her boyfriend Paul. And so when Annie ends up going to her car to leave, she notices that the car is foggy as hell. And so she's basically just like, well, first of all, she goes to the car the first time, and I believe she leaves the key, so she's not able to unlock it. And so she goes back. She finally gets in the car. Car is foggy as hell. She's noticing the windshield being foggy, so she's like touching it for a minute. And then Michael literally like pops up so freaking quick, and then ends up grabbing her. He strangles Annie. Annie is out of commission now. And so after Michael strangles Annie, we jump back to Tommy and Lindsay with Lori. And Tommy and Lindsay end up playing hide and seek, but Lindsay is still watching TV. And so Tommy ends up going behind a curtain, and while hiding from Lindsay, he turns out the window and he notices Michael Myers carrying Annie into, I want to say it's Annie's home. And so after this, Tommy freaks out again and is like, oh my gosh, the boogeyman's outside, whatever. And I want to say, I might be confused, but I want to say he tries to tell Lori again that he's out there, and she still doesn't listen. Or either he just kind of blows up. I can't remember, but I want to say he tries to tell Lori again that he saw Michael, and she just kind of blew that off. And so after this, we get another kind of lighthearted scene, or kind of another funny scene, where you see Lonnie, the bully from earlier who was bullying Tommy. He is messing with Michael's old home. And so it looks like his friends are like daring him to probably go knock on the door. And so you can hear Loomis in the back saying, hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from that. And that's literally how he says it. And then once again, as I said before, it's like, Loomis, the way you deliver these lines, you can just tell, like, Michael's turning you into a madman. Like, you're really trying to, like, get down to the bottom of this, and you're really trying to, like, fight for an answer, and he's doing all he can. And it's also equally funny because after he says to Lonnie to get away from there, Lonnie runs off with his friends, and Loomis has, like, this look of, like, hell yeah, I told them kids. Like, he has such, like, a gratified look on his face, where you can just tell he's very happy with the results of being able to tell Lonnie to move around. And so after Loomis does this and he meets back up with Officer Brackett, we see Linda, Lori's friend, and her boyfriend Bob arrive to Annie's house, I believe. And so this is also, I've said there's a lot of weird lines and weird scenes in this movie, but this line genuinely is weird to me. Like, and I can't figure out any reason as to why it would even be in the movie. And so when Linda and her boyfriend Bob pull up, Linda basically, like, gives Bob the rundown and is like, okay, we're gonna go in here, we're gonna make sure Lindsay's in her room. Lindsay, who Annie was babysitting. Annie is gonna be here with her boyfriend, and, you know, we're gonna be upstairs, first bedroom to the left, blase blase. And so while she's doing this explanation, Bob is basically like, okay, so basically I'm gonna rip your clothes off, you're gonna rip my clothes off, and then we're gonna rip Lindsay's clothes off. And so it's just, mind you, Lindsay is a child that's being babysat by Annie, so it's just like, first of all, Bob, why did you say that? And second of all, Linda, you don't want to ask Bob why he said that? It was just so weird to me because it really just didn't have a place in the movie, especially when Michael isn't a sexual character. Like, he doesn't do anything that's, like, over sexualized or anything like that to me. And so, and obviously the Halloween franchise does still play on, like, that typical, like, not overuse of nudity, but, like, unnecessary nudity and stuff like that. But I still think it doesn't have a place for, you know, weird things involving children. I just thought that was really weird, and it really does kind of take me out the movie, or it took me out the movie whenever I rewatched it. And for some reason, I don't remember that line ever being there, and I only just now noticed it as I was rewatching it for this podcast episode. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just so weird to me. And so, anyways, to move forward, as Bob and Linda are hooking up on the couch in Annie's living room, mind you, Annie is dead at this point, and Lindsay is over at Lori's house with Tommy and Lori. And so while Linda and Bob are hooking up on the couch, Michael Myers is basically lurking nearby. They don't sense him there. And so Linda and her boyfriend end up hooking up. They move to the room, and they end up hooking up. And Linda asks Bob for a beer, and so Bob says the classic, "I'll be right back," which, if you've ever watched the Scream series, you know that saying "I'll be right back" is a complete horror movie no-no. And if you say that, that means you are, in fact, not coming back. And so, as we expected, Michael ends up attacking Bob. He stabs him through the body. He ends up hanging him on the wall. This is a very classic shot because Michael does his classic head tilt, admiring his work. And I do think, unfortunately, the newer Halloween movies, I believe that's Halloween Ends, does way too much head tilt for me. I'm just like, we get it. He's an admirer of his work. He's an artist and he's sensitive about his ish. We get it. Like, be done with the head tilt. I'm so over it. But still a good thing, you know, still a classic little motion, still very much so Michael Myers coded. Still love it nonetheless. And so after he kills Bob, Michael ends up going to the bedroom where Linda's waiting for him, and he is wearing a sheet like a ghost and also wearing Bob's glasses. And at this point, Linda's kind of just like, Bob, like, what the heck are you doing? Like, come back to bed, blah, blah, blah. Of course, Michael isn't talking back. He's just standing there looking at her, being Michael, whatever. And so Linda's kind of just like, whatever, you want to be an a-hole, I'm going to call Lori. So in the midst of her trying to call Lori, Michael rushes towards Linda and ends up choking her as soon as Lori picks up the phone and tries to talk to her. And so during this time, this scene actually really confused me when I was watching it for this podcast episode, because Lori was calling Linda Annie. So in my mind, I thought that maybe there was a editing issue or like a director issue to where Jamie Lee Curtis said the lines wrong and was confusing Linda's character for Annie. But then I realized they were calling from Annie's phone, which is why she said, Annie, is that you? And of course, Linda was never able to say anything because she was getting choked. So Lori just assumed that it was Annie, whatever. And so after getting this phone call, Lori decides to go to Annie's house. And this is where we jumpstart the classic final girl run through. And that's basically where the final girl runs through the movie or runs through all the areas that we've seen throughout the movie. And they discover all the dead bodies of their friends or any other significant characters. And so the first body that she finds is Annie, with Judith Myers' gravestone. And so she's laying in bed. She doesn't really look bloody or anything, which I guess she did just get strangled, but she literally doesn't look like anything happened to her. But she's just sprawled out on the bed, and then the gravestone is above her. And it's kind of another, I keep saying weird scene, but it's another weird scene because Lori is like obviously crying, but it's like the way she's just whimpering outside the camera while looking at the body. It's really weird. You would have to watch it to understand what I'm saying. But the way she's just kind of like, I can't even explain. I'm so sorry. But the way she's just whimpering in the back while we're looking over Annie's body is just kind of weird. It's just kind of awkward and slightly funny to me. And then after she kind of backs out the room to kind of take in what she saw regarding Annie, we see Bob comedically swing down out of nowhere. And it's just like, Michael, why did you take down the artwork? And hey, where are you hanging him from? Like, what's going on? I don't understand the mechanics of Bob being able to swing down. It's like, was Michael up there and did he like push him down? Or is there like a lever that's tricked off when Lori goes to a certain place? I don't know what's going on. I don't know. And so that's also kind of funny. Another little kind of slightly funny scene. And then the last funny scene of this little final girl run through is Lori, after seeing Bob swing down, she kind of scurries away to this other corner, and the door, literally the pantry door, opens on its own, and we see Linda in the pantry making the dumbest death face I have ever seen in my life. And I'm only saying it's dumb because it's literally just her laying there or squished up in the pantry with her eyes cross-eyed. That's all she's literally doing. And if you could see my notes, I literally have written down, door open, showing Linda with stupid death face. So I hope that shows you guys how legit I'm being when I mention that. And so at this point, the movie is still kind of trickling along. And so Lori ends up returning to Tommy's house after discovering her friends. And, well, actually, before she even goes back to the home, I want to say this is where she gets a really good scene of Michael kind of coming through the shadows, because after she sees Linda, she kind of goes to another corner, and so it's like an image of her in the frame whimpering by the door, and then in the doorway it's pitch black, and slowly we see Michael's white mask just slowly becoming more visible within the door frame. And I think it's just such a creepy scene because out of nowhere after that, I believe that's when he slices at Lori's arm and does the first little damage to her. And so after that, that's when she goes back to Tommy's house and telling the kids, to get out of there, go where you need to go. And she's resting, chooses to weirdly rest at the couch, thinking that everything is cool and copacetic, and Michael ends up jumping out from behind the couch, so she stabs him, I believe, in the neck with a knitting needle, which makes Michael fall down, but for some reason Lori chooses not to double tap him to make sure that he's actually dead. And so this is where she tells the kids, hey, get out of here, whatever. And Tommy is basically just like, ma'am, you can't kill the boogeyman. Like, he literally says, you can't kill the boogeyman. It's not possible. And so this is where we see Lori run to the closet. The kids end up she puts them somewhere to kind of hide them off from Michael. And this is where we get the classic closet scene, which some of you might have seen or have seen clips of. And it's where Lori's in the closet, Michael is like busting through, and mind you, it's this one of those rickety I don't want to say basket closets, but it's like it has like the blinds type door on it, where it looks like there's blinds on it. And it just kind of slides back and forth. And so Michael is literally just like punching through this closet door. And so Lori grabs a wire hanger. Thank God she did not listen to Mother Dearest. And she unfolds it and stabs Michael in the eye. And it's kind of a corny scene because of the way she just like, on God, and just kind of like stabs the hanger directly into his eye. And so he ends up falling back. He's out of commission, quote unquote, once again. He's laying down. So Lori once again mistakenly decides to rest, and so she's resting again by another door frame. And we see Michael in the background. We think it's all over. She's sitting there breathing hard just like Michael. And then we see Michael in the background, and he does the classic Michael Myers rise. And you can tell he's been doing some serious ab workouts because he does it so effortlessly and so flawlessly. And so we see him rise up, and then we see Lori begin to stand up. And as she stands up, we see Michael stand up. And so you can see she's trying to get her bearings, and she's slowly starting to walk out of the home. And as she's walking out, Michael is coming behind her as well and ends up attacking her again. And at this point, Loomis comes in and is able to shoot Michael. And he ends up falling out of the window of the second floor that they're on, and falls onto the grass down below. And so after Michael falls out the window, we have Lori asking Loomis, was that the boogeyman? And Loomis says, yes, I believe that was. And after saying this, Loomis looks over the balcony. Michael is gone. Music drops. And after we hear the music drop, we cut to different areas or different scenes that we've seen before, like different homes, different alleyways and things like that, with the sound of Michael Myers breathing in the background. And so that concludes Halloween 1978. That is the complete breakdown of the movie. All in all, when rewatching this, I can agree that at times the movie can be a bit boring, but I think when you kind of allow it to hold your hand and walk you through the different settings, the different years, walk with the different characters, whether that's Lori, Linda, Annie, Tommy Doyle, Lindsay Wallace, Dr. Loomis, I think you can really get into the story and appreciate not only the Halloween franchise, but Halloween 1978 for what it was. And that is a jumpstart to basically the formula that we know horror to be today. And while this isn't my favorite horror movie in the Halloween franchise, my favorite Halloween movie in the franchise is actually 2018. And the scariest Halloween movie in the franchise would probably have to be anything regarding Rob Zombie. I believe Rob Zombie made Halloween 1 and 2. I believe that was like 2007 or maybe like 2007, 2009, somewhere around there. So yes, I did thoroughly enjoy rewatching this. I can definitely see how, like I said, it can be boring and how it can kind of be a slow burner for some people, but I really feel like if you're a new person to horror movies, or if you're just wanting to see, where it all began and where we're getting some of the formulas and tropes that we have today, I think you can definitely get that from Halloween 1978. And definitely looking forward to possibly looking into more of the Halloween franchise. It is 13 movies total with 5 different timelines. So will I do all of the movies? Probably not. But would I love to do another movie? Possibly Halloween 2018. I can definitely see myself doing that. But it would definitely take a lot out of me to try and do every single movie in the Halloween franchise. Especially since this is just a beginner thing for me. But I do hope you guys enjoy this journey with me, with looking into this movie. I hope you guys learned a little bit about horror movies as well as just the Halloween franchise in general. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the poll that I put out on my close friends showed that you guys wanted to see Weapons next, and then you wanted to see Him, and then Conjuring Last Rites. And so I will double check that to see if that is the true lineup that's coming for the new episodes. But if anything, I will be sure to keep you guys updated on the socials for Entitled Scares, as well as my own personal Instagram page and social media pages. But until then, if you guys have any further suggestions or feedback from me or any recommendations, please feel free to reach out to any of my socials for Entitled Scares. And I look forward to talking with you guys in the next episode. And remember, everyone's entitled to one good scare. Thank you, everybody.